Good afternoon. This is Pamela, and you're listening to Watchman on the Pod. We are going to continue in the Matthew Henry commentary of the Bible in Daniel chapter 11. The angel Gabriel performed his promise made to Daniel in the foregoing chapter, that he would show him what would befall his people in the latter days, according to that which was written in the scriptures of truth. 1. A brief prediction of the setting up of the Grecian monarchy upon the ruins of the Persian monarchy, verses 1 through 4. Number 2. A prediction of the affairs of the two kingdoms of Egypt and Syria with reference to each other, verse 5 through 20. 3. On the rise of Antiochus Epiphanes and his actions and successes, verses 21 through 29. And then 4, of the great mischief that he should do to the Jewish nation and religion, and his contempt of all religion, verses 30 through 39. And then 5, of his fall and ruin at last, verse 40 through 45. Verses 1 through 4. The angel Gabriel lets Daniel know the good service he has done to the Jewish nation, verse 1. Thus, by the angel, and at the request of the watcher, the golden head was broken, and the axe laid to the root of the tree. God's care of his church formally encourages us to depend upon him in further straits and difficulties. 2. He foretells the reign of 4 Persian kings, verse 2. 1. There will stand up 3 kings in Persia, besides Darius, in whose reign this prophecy is dated, chapter 9. 1. Mr. Bowton makes these 3 to be Cyrus, Exerxia, and Exerxes. Aterzesta or Exerxes, called by the Greeks Cambyses, and Azarias, that married Esther, called Darius, son of Hypasters. To these 3 the Persians gave these attributes. Cyrus was a father, Cambyses a master, and Darius a hoarder up. So, Herodias. Number 2. There shall be a 4th, far richer than them all, that is Exerxes, whose wealth the Greek authors take notice. By his strength, his vast army, consisting of 800,000 men at least, and his riches be stirred up against all the realm of Greece. Xerxes' expedition against Greece ended in shameful defeat. About 30 years after the first return from captivity, Darius, a young king, revived the building of the temple, owning the hand of God against his predecessors for hindering it. Ezra chapter 6, verse 7. Number 3, he foretells Alexander's conquest and the partition of his kingdom, verse 3. He is that mighty king that shall stand up against the kings of Persia, shall rule with great dominion and with despotic power, for he shall do according to his will. But, verse 4, his kingdom shall soon be broken and divided into 4 parts, but not to his posterity. His kingdom was plucked up for others besides those of his own family. Artas, his brother, was made king in Macedonia. Olympus, Alexander's mother, killed him and poisoned Alexander's 2 sons, Hercules and Alexander. Thus was his family rooted out by his own hands. Verse 5 through 20. 1. The rise and power of 2 great kingdoms out of the remains of Alexander's conquest. Verse 5. 1. Egypt was made considerable by Ptolemaeus Legus, one of Alexander's captains. He is called the king of the south, that is Egypt. Verse 8, 42, and 43. The countries that at first belonged to Ptolemy are Egypt, Phoenicia, Arabia, Libya, Ethiopia. And, 2. The kingdom of Syria was set up by Seleucus Nicanor, or the Conqueror. He was one of Alexander's princes, and the most powerful of all Alexander's successors. Ptolemy invaded Judea and took Jerusalem on a Sabbath, pretending a friendly visit. Seleucus also gave disturbance to Judea. Number 2. The fruitless attempt to unite these 2 kingdoms as iron and clay in Nebuchadnezzar's image. At the end of the certain years, about 70 after Alexander's death, and Legedi and the Seleucids shall associate, but not in sincerity. Ptolemy, Philadelphia's king of Egypt, shall marry his daughter Bernice to Antiochus Theus, king of Syria, who had already a wife called Laodice. Bernice shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither nor her posterity shall establish themselves in the kingdom of the north, but she will be given up and those that brought her. Antiochus divorced Bernice, took his former wife, Laodice, again, who poisoned him, procured Bernice and her son to be murdered, and set up her own son by Antiochus to be king, who was called Seleucus Callinicus. 3. A war between the two kingdoms. Verse 7. 8. A branch from the same root with Bernice shall stand up in his estate. Ptolemaeus Euergetes, the son of Ptolemaeus Philadelphus, shall come against Seleucus Callinicus, king of Syria, to avenge his sister's quarrel, and shall prevail, and shall carry away rich booty into Egypt, and shall continue more years than the king of the north. But, verse 9, he shall be forced to come into his kingdom and return into his own land to keep peace there. Number 4. The long reign of Antiochus the Great, king of Syria, Seleucus Callinicus, that king of the north that was overcome, verse 7, and died miserably, left two sons, Seleucus and Antiochus. These are the sons of the king of the north that shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a great multitude of great forces to recover what their father had lost. Verse 10. But Seleucus the elder was poisoned and reigned only 2 years, and his brother Antiochus succeeded him, who reigned 37 years and was called the Great. 1. The king of the south in this war shall at first have great success. Ptolemaeus Philopator, moved with indignation at the indignities done by Antiochus the Great, shall come forth and fight with him, and shall bring a vast army. And the other multitude, the army of Antiochus, shall be given into his hand. Ptolemaeus Philopator, having gained this victory, his heart was lifted up, and went into the temple at Jerusalem, and entered the most holy place. 2. The king of the north, Antiochus the Great, shall return with a great army than the former, and at the end of times, that is, years, he shall come with a mighty army and great riches against the king of the south, that is, Ptolemaeus Epiphanes, who succeeded Ptolemaeus Philopator, his father. In this expedition he had powerful allies, verse 14. Philip of Macedon was confederate with Antiochus against the king of Egypt. Antiochus routed him, destroyed a great part of his army, whereupon the Jews joined with him, helped him to besiege Ptolemaeus' garrisons. Then the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall and shall come to nothing. Verse 14. Whereupon, verse 15, the king of the north, the same Antiochus, shall carry on his design against the king of the south another way. 1. He shall surprise his strongholds, all that he has got in Syria and Samaria, and the king of Egypt shall not be able to withstand him. 2. He shall make himself master of the land of Judea. Verse 16. He that cometh against him, that is the king of the north, shall carry all before him. So the land of Israel was wasted and consumed. The land of Judea lay between these two potent kingdoms of Egypt and Syria, so that in all the struggles between them that was sure to suffer. 3. He shall still push on his war against the king of Egypt, and set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, taking advantage of the infancy of Ptolemy Epiphanes. Verse 17. 4. His war with the Romans, verse 18, he shall turn his face to the isles about the Hellespont, but a prince or state, or some shall return his reproach upon himself. This was fulfilled when the two Sipsos were sent with an army against Antiochus and gave him a total defeat. Thus he caused the reproach offered by him to cease. 5. His fall. When he was routed by the Romans and was forced to abandon to them all he had in Europe, he turned his own land and to raise money to pay his tribute. He plundered a temple of Jupiter, which so incensed his own subjects against him that they killed him. So he fell and was no more found. Verse 19. 6. His next successor, verse 20, there rose up one in his place, a raiser of taxes, a sender forth of the extortioner. Seleucus Philopator, the elder son of Antiochus the Great, was a great oppressor of his subjects, and exacted abundance of money from them. He likewise attempted to rob the temple at Jerusalem, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle, but poisoned by Heliodorus, one of his own servants. Number 5. From all this let us learn, 1. That God is in his province sets up one and pulls down another as he pleases. Some have called great men the footballs of fortune, or rather, they are the tools of providence. 2. This world is full of wars and fightings, which come from men's lust. All right, and I will pick that up in just a minute. Okay, I think they're done barking now. Now, verses 21 to 45. All this is a prophecy of the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, the little horn. Chapter 8, verse 9. A sworn enemy to the Jewish religion and a bitter persecutor. Some things in this prediction concerning Antiochus are alluded to in the New Testament predictions of the Antichrist, especially verse 36 and 37. 1. His character. He called himself Epiphanes, the illustrious. The heathen writers describe him as an odd-humored man, boisterous, base, and sordid. He would sometimes steal out of the court into the city and herd with any infamous company in disguise. Some took him to be silly, others to be mad. He is called a vile person, for he had been a hostage at Rome for the fidelity of his father when the Romans had subdued him. 2. His ascension to the crown. By a trick, he got his elder brother's son, Demetrius, to be sent a hostage to Rome in exchange for him, and his elder brother being killed by Heliodorus, verse 20. He took the kingdom. The states of Syria did not give it to him, verse 21, but he came in peaceably, pretending to reign for his brother's son, Demetrius, then a hostage at Rome. But by flatteries he obtained the kingdom, crushed Heliodorus, even to the prince of the covenant, his nephew, the rightful heir. He pretended to covenant that he would resign whenever he should return, verse 22. But, verse 23, after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, as one whose avowed maxim it is that princes ought not to be bound by their word any longer than it is for their interest. And with a small people that at first cleave to him, he shall become strong. And, verse 24, he shall enter peaceably upon the fattest places of the kingdom of Syria, shall scatter among the people the prey and the spoil and riches, to insinuate himself into their affections. But at the same time he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, to make himself master of them. When he has got the garrisons into his hands, he will scatter his spoil no more, but rule by force. 3. His war with Egypt. His second expedition thither is described, verse 25 and 27. Antiochus shall stir up his power and courage against Ptolemaeus Philopator, king of Egypt. Ptolemy thereupon shall be stirred up to battle against him. Antiochus's army shall overthrow the Egyptian army. The king of Egypt shall be betrayed by his own counselors. After the battle, a treaty of peace shall be set on foot, and these two kings shall meet, but they shall neither of them be sincere in it. And then no marvel that it shall not prosper. The peace shall not last. Number 4. Another expedition against Egypt. From the former he returned with great riches, verse 28, and therefore took the first occasion to invade Egypt again 2 years after, verse 29. But this attempt shall not succeed, for verse 30, the ships of Chittim shall come against him, that is, the navy of the Romans, or ambassadors from the Roman Senate, who came in ships. Ptolemaeus Philopator, king of Egypt, being now in a strict alliance with the Romans, craved their aid against Antiochus, who had besieged him and his mother Cleopatra in the city of Alexandria. The Roman Senate thereupon sent an embassy to Antiochus to command him to raise the siege, and fearing the Roman power, he was forced to give orders for the raising of the siege and the retreat of his army out of Egypt. So Livy and others relate the story. Number 5. In his return from his expedition into Egypt, verse 28, he did exploits against the Jews. Then he spoiled the city and temple. But the most terrible storm was in his return from Egypt 2 years after, verse 30. Then he took Judea in his way home, and because he could not gain his points in Egypt by reason of the Romans interposing, he wreaked his revenge upon the Jews. 1. He had rooted antipathy to the Jews' religion. His heart was against the Holy Covenant, verse 28. And verse 30, he had indignation against the Holy Covenant. He hated the law of Moses and the worship of the true God, and was vexed at the privileges of the Jewish nation and the promises made to them. 2. He carried on his malicious designs against the Jews by the assistance of some apostate Jews. He kept up intelligence with those that forsook the Holy Covenant. Verse 30. He read much in the book of the Maccabees of the mischief done to the Jews by these treacherous men of their own nation, Jason and Melanas of their party. Such as do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt with flatteries to make use of them as decoys to draw in others. Verse 32. Number 3. He profaned the temple. Arms stand on his part. Verse 31. Not only his own army, but deserters from the Jewish religion, and they polluted the sanctuary, the strength. The story of this we have, 1 Maccabees 1:21 and 2 Maccabees verse 15. Antiochus went into the most holy temple. Melanas, that traitor to the laws and to his own country, being his guide. Antiochus took away the daily sacrifice. Verse 31. Then he set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar. 1 Maccabee 1:54. Even an idol altar. Verse 59. And called the temple of Jupiter Olympus. 2 Maccabees. Wow. Chapter 6, verse 2. Number 4, he persecuted those who retained their integrity. Though there are many who forsake the covenant, yet there is a people who do know their God, and they shall be strong and do exploits. Verse 32. Good old Eleazar, one of the principal scribes, when he had swine's flesh thrust into his mouth, did bravely spit it out again, though he knew he must be tormented to death for so doing. Second Maccabees chapter 6, verse 19. The mother of her 7 sons were put to death for adhering to their religion. Second Maccabees chapter 7. This might well be called doing exploits, for to choose suffering rather than sin is a great exploit. The right knowledge of God is the strength of the soul, and in the strength of that gracious souls do exploits. Concerning this people that knew their God, we are told they shall instruct many. Verse 33. They shall show others what they have learned of the difference between truth and falsehood, good and evil. Some understand this of a society newly erecting from the propagating of divine knowledge, called Assyrians, Pestis, so the name signifies. They shall fall by the cruelty of Antiochus, shall be put to death by his rage. Their sufferings for righteousness' sake would try and purge the nation of Jews. When they shall fall, they shall not be utterly cast down, but they shall be holpen with a little help. Verse 34. It is likewise foretold that many shall cleave to them with flatteries. When they see the Maccabees prosper, some Jews shall join with them, but will only pretend friendship, either with design to betray them or in hope to rise with them. But the fiery trial, verse 35, will separate between the precious and the vile. Though these troubles may continue long, yet they will have an end. He grew insolent. Number 5. He grew insolent and profane, and being puffed up with his conquest, bade defiance to heaven, and trampled upon everything that was sacred. Verse 36. He shall impiously dishonor the God of Israel, called here the God of gods. He shall, in defiance of him, do according to his will against his people and his holy religion. This was fulfilled when Antiochus forbade sacrifices to be offered in God's temple, and ordered the Sabbaths to be profaned, the sanctuary and the holy people to be polluted, to the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances, and this upon pain of death. First Maccabees 1:45. Antiochus did not regard any god, but magnified himself above all. Verse 37. Thus he carried all before him, till the indignation was accomplished. Verse 36. Antiochus shall not regard the God of his fathers. He made laws to abolish the religion of his country, and to bring in the idols of the Greeks. He shall set up an unknown God, a new God. Verse 38. In his estate he shall honor the God of horses, a supposed deity of power, a God whom his fathers knew not, nor worshipped. This seems to be Jupiter Olympius, but never introduced among the Syrians till Antiochus introduced it. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds in the temple of Jerusalem, which is called the sanctuary of strength. Verse 31. And here the fortresses of munitions. There he shall set up the image of this strange god, some by the Mahazium, or god of forces. The Antiochus shall worship, understand money, which is said to answer all things. Number 6. Here seems to be another expedition into Egypt. Ptolemy, king of the south, pushes at him, verse 40, makes an attempt upon some of his territories, whereupon Antiochus, the king of the north, comes against him like a whirlwind, with incredible swiftness and fury, with chariots and horsemen, and many ships, a great force. He shall come through countries, and shall overflow and pass over. In this flying march, which with many countries shall be overthrown by him, and he shall enter into the glorious land, the land of Israel. Some shall escape his fury, particularly Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon, verse 41. But the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver and all precious things of Egypt, verse 43. Number 7. Here is a prediction of the fall and ruin of Antiochus, as before, chapter 8, verse 25.
when he is in the height of his honor. Tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Verse 44. This obliged him to drop the enterprises he had in hand, and to go against the Persians and the Phoenicians. Now comes the last effort of his rage against the Jews. When he finds himself perplexed and embarrassed in his affairs, he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. Verse 44. When impiety grows very prudent, we may see its ruin near. He shall come to his end, and none shall help him. This is the same with that which was foretold in chapter 8, verse 25. He shall be broken without hand. And remember, he died of an incurable plague. Remember, we read that. So he died of an incurable plague, and that he even cried out to the God of Israel that if he basically heals them, he'll let the Jews do their religion, but God did not heal him. But I found that interesting that he did that. I had never known that. Anyway, brothers and sisters, that completes chapter 11, commentary from Matthew Henry. I will be picking up and finishing Daniel. Hopefully, prayerfully, I will be doing that today. That is my intention. I love you all so very, very much. Keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters. Your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts, so you will not sin against God or be deceived. Until next time, be blessed.